And so I'm going to go through this very simply, short and simple. Okay, don't go away because we'll need to, I'll tell you when. Okay, let me go through my presentation. I'll try to. So today's portion was Shmini, and the first half I spoke a little bit more about the strange death of the sons of Aaron. And then I said, it goes on then into the concept of Kashrut. So I go into the question of whether we're entering a new realm of Kashrut, kosher lobster, maybe, the debate of Hebrew national 100% all beef kosher versus lab-grown hot dogs. Are we going that way? So I started there because Shmini gives us some of the key elements of Kashrut, not all of it, but key elements. So it gives an opportunity to explore how and why it's such a controversial topic. As Kashrut was for centuries the way of distinguishing Jews from their neighbors. And Shmini hints at it. It says, you keep away from the treif animals because you are a holy people. You keep away from that which is impure, right? So one of the things it was that would distinguish us from our neighbors. And even from our Muslim neighbors who, you mentioned, right, they celebrate, they observe a variation on Shechita, the basic principle of cutting the arteries in the neck, right? They in halal. Right. So now this in just this last few weeks, it has become a critical matter in Europe. Countries are pushing a ban on Jewish and Muslim kosher and halal slaughter. So this a few weeks ago, the European Union Court in effect allowed the banning of kosher meat by requiring stunning before shechita. So if you know some rules of kosher, if you stun, number one, we're not sure the animal's actually dead. That's number one. Number two, it congeals the blood in the animal's head, so that creates a problem. And actual scientists like Temple Grandin determined that it is a very ineffective method for killing animals. It actually inflicts more pain and cruelty than it's supposed to. But the court, in its righteousness, gives this pronunciation. So Elliot Abrams, who was a trusted diplomat for many years, senior foreign policy advisor, now on the U.S. Commission on Public Diplomacy, writes about what's the truth behind it. So he writes, we saw another form on February 13th when the so-called European Court of Human Rights ruled Belgium was entirely free to ban kosher slaughter. The courts reduced it in the context of animal rights. Courts considered that the protection of public morals, which Article 9 of the Constitution, usually public morals about prostitutes on the street, could not be understood as being intended solely to protect human dignity in the sphere of interpersonal relations. So human rights is not about protecting human dignity. No. In interpersonal relations. The convention was not indifferent to the living environment of individuals covered by its protection and particular animals. So animals are individuals. Good. Whose protection already had been considered by the court. According to the convention, could not be interpreted as promoting the absolute upholding of rights and freedoms enshrined without regard to animal suffering. So the writer comments, let's be clear, the courts found that the practice of Judaism endangered public morals. That's what Elliot Abrams says. This on the continent where the very existence of Jews was not so long itself considered to be a threat to public morals. Right? Jews were a threat to public morals. Okay. So nor is Belgium alone. Kosher slaughter also banned in Sweden, Iceland, Norway, and Slovenia. So far. The president of the European Jewish Congress, Ariel Muzikan, said, we're already seeing attempts across Europe to follow this Belgian ban, now sadly legitimized by the European Court. So the hypocrisy visible to all this from an Ira Rifkin. If easing animal cruelty is the motivation, why are factory farming, isolation and confining of veal calves, the cutting of hens' beaks, the production of foie gras, and endless pregnancies that dairy cows are forced to endure also not allowed? There's the continued use of animals for medical research and legality of hunting strictly for sport. Nobody will touch that because in one of the countries where they asked this question, they said, well, that is a cultural right reserved to the people. But kosher is not a cultural right reserved to the people. Very hypocritical. Now, we will also add the running of the bulls in Polona, right? That's nice. That's not fair to human beings. Maybe that's the animal's revenge. The bullfighting. Which country does still practice bullfighting where they kill the bull? Yeah, but which one kills the bull? In which country do they kill the bull? Spain. One of the countries they kill, one of them they spare. All right. That's okay. That's okay. But Jews? Okay. So nothing new under the sun. Now, we thought maybe that it's to put Muslims in their place, right? Because we don't want Muslims like Europeans. We're politely pushing them back to North Africa and the Middle East, and Jews happen to be in the way. Right. Yeah. And then cook. Maybe, maybe not. We know, though, that they will not touch the tribal rights of the Inuit to club seals to death because that's a tribal right. Jews don't have tribal rights. They have tribal rights. So Jews have been targeted all along. Nothing new. The exact same situation. Exactly. I read this. As soon as I read this, I say, I remember something, my father's documents. This is from a newspaper in Bavaria. Bavaria is the state where Hitler had his headquarters, Munich, München. Neue Tierschutz in Bayern, a new animal rights protection in Bavaria. So this is the article. It is 1951, July 6, 1951, in a local paper, Allgemein. New animal protection in Bavaria, limitation on the killing of animals, the demand for a ban on kosher slaughter. So my father writes, it proposed the height of hypocrisy, shameless attempt to gain votes in an election. Elections coming up. Like so many politicians, let's think of something that they like. They don't like Jews, let's do this. It's right after the Holocaust. So the new head of the Bavarian State Compensation Office described reparations, right? Because Germany was going to pay reparations. It was part of Adenauer's deal to clean Germany's reputation. So he says, no, it's a crime against the Bavarian people. Bavarian people brought us Hitler, right? That was his base. Now people in the same city are declaring that slaughtering must be banned for reasons of humanity. Don't want to pay the Jews for what we killed, for what we took and killed them, but now we put poor animals. In a country where the cry of pain of countless murdered Jews went almost unheard, it must be more than strange to display excessive love for animals by accusing Jews of crimes against humanity for slaughtering them. Strutting around in the toga of animal friendliness has been a well-known anti-Semitic practice. Always the same circles. They preach love for animals and trample on charity. We remember the Nazis who banned slaughter and practiced the mass slaughter of entire groups of people. Right? It is re-invoking what the Nazis did. So he went on to list many exceptionally cruel methods of slaughter were standard. Should also point out the cruel method of killing crabs, eels, or rabbits, or the ritual killing of poultry and tearing off the heads of chicken and pigeons, common in non-Jewish households. You grab your chicken, you pull the head off, right? As well as slaughter of geese and ducks with blunt or jagged knives, all carried out by unprofessional people. These domestic slaughters fly in the face of all humanity. So people could kill at home any way they wanted. Nobody had any law about it. And then it was, he points out in 1894, it's the German military that determined that the Jews are right. On the basis of this report, they looked at the method of slaughter. And the Army Administration, 1894, made killing by cutting the neck compulsory in meat canning factories that worked for the Army. Same thing was ordered also by the Dutch ministry. In other words, the same Germans said the kosher slaughter method is acceptable. And we want to copy it for our meat. Same Imperial Germany that had just crushed the French in 1870, 1880. Going back to Temple Grandin, one of the foremost experts in animal care. She is working with rabbinic authorities to introduce methods that are effective. What she has a complaint is not the cutting of throats, it's the way of the hoisting and shackling, and she's recommended pens a different way. But she's not grandstanding. She's coming up with practical approach. So I'm not going to go into in greater depth, right? The purpose of Kashrut is a way of concession to human needs. Adam is a vegetarian. Noah is allowed to eat meat. And so we understand that it's better to eat meat than to burn in hell, which is paraphrased for Paul, better to marry than to burn in hell, right? For us, using the animal is the worst thing than marriage. Okay, not for Paul. So anyway, rabbinic law, we have this the concept of ever min a high, that you may not tear a limb from an animal while it's still alive. And so it is a moral commitment for all humanity. By the way, eating an animal while it's still alive, still a Bedouin custom, recorded even up till modern times. Cutting the camel while it's still alive. In China, still eating the brain of a live monkey. Friends that have seen that. Modern version of the oyster and the half-shell. The oyster is still alive. The lobster is boiled alive. All right, so that's a basic principle that would, and that becomes a base by way for the word treif, treifa, because anything that's been torn to death by a wild animal is in and of itself non-kosher. Therefore, it becomes extended to all animals that are not properly slaughtered. And the return of blood to the earth is a symbol of life. And the general principle to work on the principle of tzar balei chayim, very strong in Jewish law, the pain of feeling and the suffering of animals. I will say that there were many great rabbis also who were vegetarians. Rav Kook, David Cohen, his son-in-law, Shai Yeshuv Cohen, another son-in-law, and Rabbi Sachs, Rabbi Sachs and Rabbi Wolpe, quite a few. But there's some other things that go into kashrut. We talk about health, checking the brain, the lungs for lesions, things like that are standard practice. Sakana chamira me'asura, a dangerous act is worse than a forbidden act. So I'm just going to go ahead but go now to the new solution. We solved the problem both for the anti-Semites and for the Jews now, which is going around any bans on kashrut. So we replace Hebrew National premium hot 100% beef franks with smart dogs, kosher parve, hot dogs, plant-based. Yes? It's the Circle K. Circle K is a recognized supervisor. All right. So now this is interesting, and I'm not going to, it's a great difference, but there are actually very serious debates going on in the kosher world about meat-grown, lab-grown meat, where you take the DNA strand and you can replicate it. And then you use CRISPR or other methods, you can tweak the DNA to change and so on. So now, all sorts of questions come around in halacha. Number one is if you take something out of the meat that is in itself not edible by a dog or a cat, and you can then turn it into food, then it is not the original product. So, for example, gelatin, technically based on today's reading of the Torah, is kosher because, in principle, because the bone is not considered flesh. And the Rashi explains why. And then you take the bone and transform it by chemicals to its components, and then you take out of the components that part that makes the gelatin. So the problem, which is asked on the kosher meat, is, but there are pieces in the processing gelatin, the meat is not cleaned off the bone properly. So we need to know if the meat is clean. So we'd rather use gelatin. Okay, but now, is the DNA strand something that a dog or a cat could eat? Am I taking it now and producing something new? So this is a halachic debate. Is it kosher if the donor animal is still alive when it's taken from, when the sample is taken? Because then it's ever min high. Is it the same thing as ever min high? Is it different, right? Is it taking a piece of a living animal? Or is it just an extraction of a lab sample that doesn't really count? Right? So that's question number one. Number two, must the donor animal then be slaughtered kosher and take that strand, because now it is kosher, and then use that one? Right? That's the option. What if the donor animal itself was not a kosher animal to begin with? And I take that DNA. Would that be considered modification? Would it be davar chadash, something completely new? All of this is, brave new world territory. Now, is the meat now fleshig, or is it part of it? Also, right? So now, does it retain its dairy status or its meat status, right? Are we allowed to take a blood test? Have you done that? You're not eating it. That's the answer. All right. It's not for wanton infliction of cruelty. That might be the right.
The process of making the meat kosher is to drain the blood, which is supposed to be black.
Right.
And whatever remains is edible.
Right.
Now, if you do it in the lab, you're going to be creating that.
Right. There's no blood. Right. There's no blood. Right, it's the vachadash. It's a completely so there are some one of the chief rabbis of Israel said it's completely kosher. There's some that disagree because the question, it's about if there are certain policies and principles. So again, the same thing: is it dairy or is it meat? And we're very careful. One company came out and said this is kosher pig, and they refused to give it a kosher certificate. They said, you can't go and do it. So Bako Bits has a K or has an OU, but it doesn't say bacon. Bako Bits. At least there's a change in the name. We had the same problem like with milk substitutes. So properly, when we serve it, we should serve it in the container. so that we know that it is not, that's one of the requirements, right? So we know that we're not making, so the same thing might be. So now we have one other question, which comes out of this, which some people raise. If once the world has all gone to veggie burgers or DNA burgers, what happens to Jewish distinctiveness? There's nothing else to be kosher about that sets us apart. Do we want to disappear? Kashrut has been one of the things that helps make us distinct. So that's another issue.
But actual kosher, well, so much actual big business.
Oh, it's a business. It's a big, big business. Yeah. There's, the corruption is less. The corruption is less. Yeah. 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 But the corruption is not, no, it's not, I don't think they're really big case of corruption. There was corruption in the kosher business at the beginning of the last century because mafia got into it and they would extort from the butchers, fraction price. And this is apparently the origin of glatt kosher. When the refugees from East Europe came, they said, look, oh, they got squeezed their way, they wormed their way out of the mafia protection racket by saying, oh, we have a special kosher and you guys can't get involved in it. And the mafia left them, it was Jewish mafia, and they left them alone. And that was the origin of glatt kosher becoming now accepted because they had stronger supervision. So they actually engaged in supervision, which up till that time was not so well done. So there's where the corruption comes in. Every once in a while, butchers get caught. It was only a few years ago. But the industry itself, there's the waste. There's waste. Is it expensive? Yeah. Are they working hard? I think they're working hard. I give them credit. But what will happen to the whole industry once everybody goes to DNA beef? Now it's a problem. Yeah.
Butcher had to serve the hinds and the cow.
Yeah.
They had to serve
till today, yes, in the United States. Yeah. Right.
Then they put a quota on how much slaughter
Interesting.
they do.
Yeah.
So they made the hinds kosher.
Oh,
They had
okay.
to take out the vein.
Yeah. So that's it. So So it wasn't worth it in most cases to cut out the vein, but interesting, but because they were limited by there was a Polish anti-Semitic act, right? It was Polish control, not German control. So in Israel, they do the same thing because there are not enough non-Jews to sell the hindquarters to. So they remove the vein. It makes it a more expensive process. You can buy hindquarter. I know the fellow who does it, and it's expensive. It's expensive, but it's a better piece of meat. What can I tell you? So, yeah. The hind, yeah, it is, and you can buy it. Bakar Meats, you can get it online. He'll send it to you. Yeah. So till today, I'll send this. Yeah. Better than burger. Yeah. Right. Yeah, well, that's it. So the rabbis asked this question also. It's in a lot of rabbinic books, the question, wait a minute, am I forbidden the taste or am I forbidden the legal act? So medieval book, it's got the name in or I'm not sure, but he goes into the question about, there are all sorts of things that are forbidden, but they're forbidden because of the law, not for the enjoyment itself. So the example gives your neighbor's wife. Your neighbor's wife is forbidden, but if she's divorced, she's permitted. And he goes on into the same question. A certain kind of fish is forbidden, but if you have the fish that has the same taste, it's permitted. So the prohibition is not against the enjoyment. The prohibition is against following the rule. So and this is like the parva ice cream. Well, you buy parva ice cream, it has kosher on it, made from plants, plant-based. So this has been going on for a long time. The question now is with the lab grown, because lab grown would be the exact same thing genetically, physical structure, medical, the chemical structure is all the same. So, but now one other thing. For all those who think vegetarianism is a solution to animal cruelty, I ask, what will happen to the billions of domestic chickens and turkeys and cows that will be unemployed? Not only will they be unemployed, they're no longer edible. Who takes care of them? You're going to have the largest mass die-off of species in certainly in modern history, the largest mass die-off, because who's going to feed 1 billion cows? Nobody's going to feed the 1 billion cows. Nobody's going to feed the 1 billion chickens. So will you leave them to die slowly on the farm? Because the farmer doesn't have the money to feed them. Or you're going to take money from people's pockets and take it away from children to feed them and give it to feed the cow? Is that moral? Or do you allow the animals to go into the wild and fend for themselves and die cruelly by starvation because they don't know how to forage anymore, killed cruelly by wolves and bears and so on? All right, give me an answer for that. The safest thing for any animal is to be eaten by a human being because it guarantees that the animal has a life and has a painless end rather than a painful end. In nature, the end is painful. So, yeah, okay. So it'll be fascinating. I would say it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out in the future. We're going to see what happens. Okay, so that's my discussion. I'm going to stop the share, and I want to leave. Let's go ahead. I want to close the meeting. Wait, do you have one question?
Yeah, I think it's saying you type, hey, wild animals, wild animals.
Well, the animal has a right to eat an animal. That's a God-given right for the animal to eat an animal. Right? Right. We're worried about the polar bear cub and we're worried about the seal. The polar bear cub will batter the seal at some point later on. We know. All right. Oh, okay.
Greenpeace ships go when they try to stop them.
Right. Right.
What is that? Is that they're doing the same thing. They're allowing some people to kill indiscriminately and kill it.
Yeah. So like if you're a native of some place, an indigenous of some place, that is your custom to smash the seal, that's okay. Or kill the whale, which is the Eskimo, the Inuit. Yes, because that's their food. No, so you can make a legitimate case that, some kind of hunting can be allowed, some kind of fishing, and you can make a case for controlled use. So whales, controlled use can be reduced. You can make cases for that. Sustainable. That's a great question. Always sustainable production system.
State of California allows bears. Every year there's a big bear hunt off, and they
Yeah.
for sample purposes.
Sampling purposes. Yeah, you need to eliminate a certain number, but wolves also need to be under control. Numbers, right? So okay. So there's a question about what's a reasonable amount of animal husbandry and wilderness care, so that we have a reasonable environment of nature and so on. All this, we can work out, but you don't do it by going to the, I don't know, like gluing yourself to a Van Gogh painting or something. I don't know what was the latest gimmick that was for the environment, things like that, because that stops the argument there and you never get anywhere, but you feel good. You feel famous about it. So I'm going to leave the meeting at this point because I want to go and I'm going to ask Marcel to take it at this point. So go ahead and, yeah, AB and